Hey girl, let's talk today about your girl hormones. The first one actually that I'm going to talk about in this video is estrogen. And I want to tell you about the relationship between estrogen and thyroid. So I talked about all about thyroid hormone and thyroid testing and what you really need to be doing to get your thyroid testing correct in the last video. And today I want to share with you about how estrogen is related to your thyroid. So there is a chance that you actually knew enough to ask for thyroid testing from your doctor. And if you watched the last video or if you had done any research online, you might have found out that you really need more than just a single number for your thyroid test. And you might have even asked for this whole range of thyroid testing, which is great. But even if you got that full panel, you might be missing a key piece of why your thyroid isn't functioning the way that it's supposed to, which is the estrogen component. So here's the thing. Our thyroid hormones and our sex hormones play together. They're all in the same sandbox. Now, I've talked in other videos about how actually all of our endocrine system plays together. So everything in our hormone system, our endocrine system, is totally connected. Everything has intersection points. There are no hormone systems that are just sitting out there, out in la la land, doing their own thing in your body and unconnected to everything else. Everything affects everything. So that's key point number one. But let's talk specifically about estrogen and thyroid. So first I'm going to back it up a minute and let's talk about estrogen overall. So when I use the word estrogen, I'm actually using it mostly because it's easy and most people understand it. But in reality, we have multiple forms of estrogen. The three forms of estrogen that we actually talk the most about, because they're the most prevalent, are estrone, estriol, and estradiol. And they all have slightly different functions in the body. And they're all maybe high at different points in our lives, if we are premenopause or postmenopause or going through puberty or during pregnancy. Women actually have a slightly different hormone picture every single day because we're just cool like that. So your hormones might look a little different every day. But when I'm talking about estrogen, that's what I'm talking about. Now, here are some of the things that estrogen does for us. So being that girly hormone, it makes us more like women. So we have, it helps us to develop breasts and hips and have the curvier figure. It also gives our skin a more youthful appearance. So you have the nice dewy glow to your skin. It makes your body hair finer and less pronounced. So, you know, like you have thinner hair on your legs probably than your husband does, but at the same time you have nice full hair on your head. It also, of course, helps to regulate our menstrual cycle, and it's really important for mood. So when estrogen levels are out of balance, mood can be out of balance. Interestingly enough, when I talk about thyroid being out of balance can also have an impact on your mood. So two really key markers for our mood are going to be whether our hormones, particularly in this case estrogen and thyroid hormone, are working the way that they are supposed to. One other thing that's really, really important is that it increases sensitivity to insulin. So insulin has lots of jobs. I've talked about it in some other videos. Insulin is the blood sugar regulating hormone. So when our insulin is, or when our body is sensitized to insulin, when it recognizes that insulin is calling, insulin is able to pull glucose or blood sugar out of our bloodstream and into the cells where it's actually able to be used. If that isn't working very well, then we can get signs of insulin resistance where your body isn't really listening to the call of insulin. We get higher insulin and higher blood sugar. So insulin resistance is what we don't want. We do want insulin sensitivity. One of the other big factors here that really gets missed when we're thinking about weight loss is that insulin is also responsible for fat storage. So if we have problems with estrogen, we are probably going to have problems with insulin, and insulin is going to be causing us problems with our weight. So here's another way that our hormones are all going to be working together. And we might see one symptom, but there's this underlying root cause of this balance between these hormones. Thyroid hormone is another one where if thyroid is out of balance, we tend to keep weight on. So insulin, estrogen, and thyroid all play together in the weight game. Now, I always tell women that you have to get healthy to lose weight. You don't have to lose weight to get healthy, which is a flip from what most people say. But what I'm talking about is if we have some of these underlying things, if our hormones are out of balance, it doesn't matter how many calories you count or how many steps you climb or how many steps that you have on your Fitbit, you're not going to be able to lose weight if these hormones are out of balance. So what can happen when estrogen is too low? So this is actually a little bit less common, but it can certainly happen post-menopause or if we have other things happening in our endocrine system. So some things that can happen when estrogen is too low, we can get those menopause symptoms like hot flashes, vaginal dryness, incontinence, urinary leakage. This can totally happen even if you've never had a baby. Sorry to break it to you. Or even if you had a C-section, same thing, sorry to break it to you, might happen anyway. Chronic anxiety and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So those are all things that can happen when estrogen is too low. So what about when estrogen is too high? So this might be called estrogen dominance or even testosterone deficiency, because testosterone is something that has to be in balance with estrogen. So when we have too much estrogen, we can have really horrible PMS. We can have really heavy periods and trouble with menstrual cramping, even things like fibroids or endometriosis, which is something I see lots of women for in my practice. You might get fibrocystic breasts, which just means that your breast tissue almost feels like ropey or like there's cysts inside of your breast. And also, of course, you could be more at risk for certain kinds of cancer that are driven by hormones like estrogen. At the same time, it also might have a change in your immune system that can put you more at risk for thyroid disorders like Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. Okay, so if you watched my thyroid video, you learned about T3. So T3 is the active form of thyroid hormone. That's actually what your body can use metabolically to get its gears going, to rev up, to have a strong metabolism. Now, here's the thing. When estrogen gets too high, it can cause problems with that T3. So it can bind that up by increasing sex hormone binding globulin. So I mentioned some of those tests that you might want to have done if you're looking at thyroid function. And one of them that was kind of that extra credit test is sex hormone binding globulin. So your high estrogen levels, if your estrogen is too high, you're going to crank up that sex hormone binding globulin, and then that T3 that your body is supposed to be using for its metabolism is going to be bound up. You can't use it. So we have these receptors on our cells. These receptors are like locks, and the key is the hormone, and they have to fit in just perfectly. If that T3 is bound up to sex hormone binding globulin, it's not going to be able to actually get into the cell. So too high estrogen is going to cause potentially too low thyroid. So if you're having thyroid symptoms and you can't figure out why else that might be going on, you might look backwards and say, what's going on with estrogen? That might be from a whole lot of different causes. That might be from taking the birth control pill that have really high levels of estrogen for a long time. That might be from xenoestrogens that are in the environment, things like plastics. That could be things that we are putting on our skin from our makeup. Or that could be that our body isn't doing a very good job of converting our hormones from estrogen into other downstream metabolites. So those are ways that we can have excess estrogen, and that estrogen can actually be directly impacting our thyroid function. So a couple of things that you can do to help get your estrogen working better or getting rid of excess estrogen so that it's no longer causing this downstream effect to your thyroid. So one of the first things you can do is start to do what I just said and get rid of some of that crap. So get rid of plastic water bottles. That is huge. Even when I talk to women, the very first thing I want to say is drink more water, but don't be drinking it out of a plastic water bottle. It causes huge problems. We also put a ton, and I kind of mean that literally, like if you added up all of the crap we put on our skin for an entire lifetime, it probably ends up to be about a ton of chemicals that we put on that are endocrine disruptors that can be jacking up our hormones and causing estrogen to go really high at the same time that it's going to suppress our other hormones. So when estrogen goes really high, it starts to be the bully on the playground and cause problems with other hormones that can't measure up to estrogen, because estrogen is really potent. So you want to get rid of things that are, like I said, plastic, or things you're putting on your skin that could be hormone disruptors. Something else you want to do is to support your liver function, because we get rid of extra estrogen in the liver. So we bind up our spent estrogen and take it out with the trash, which is our poop. But that only happens in the liver. So if we're burdening our liver with things like alcohol and caffeine, you're going to have a really hard time dealing with the estrogen burden. If you're not able to deal with the estrogen burden, you might have a downstream effect of a thyroid problem. Again, if you watch the thyroid video, we also convert our inactive thyroid, which is T4, into the active thyroid, which is T3. One of the main places that happens is the liver. So we really got to ease up on the liver. I also use a lot of gut testing in my practice. So we can have a particular enzyme in our digestive tract called beta-glucuronidase. And beta-glucuronidase, I just told you your liver wants to send that spent hormone, the trash hormones, out in the trash. It's going to send it out in your poop. But what happens is this little hormone goes along, and it's like a little devil in there, breaking up the bonds that would be taking that estrogen out of your body. So now we have toxic estrogen that can get recycled into your bloodstream and start wreaking havoc on the rest of your endocrine system, including your thyroid hormone. So I'm always going to want to look at a GI panel to see if there's a potential reason why your estrogen isn't being metabolized correctly, and therefore the estrogen is having that impact on your thyroid hormone. Do you see how all of these things are connected? There is no way to just be like, let me look at this one thing. This is going to be the answer. I call that the whack-a-mole approach, right? We can keep whacking that mole. We can keep, playing that carnival game where we whack that symptom. We put a Band-Aid on the symptom. But if we don't ever look at the root cause, we're never going to actually resolve the problem. The other thing is, I think it's really important that women who have either had a hysterectomy or a postmenopausal do not take unopposed estrogen. So unopposed estrogen just means that you're taking only estrogen, especially synthetic estrogen, without looking at your total hormone balance. So unopposed estrogen can cause lots of downstream problems, including problems with your thyroid. So if you are postmenopausal, or if you've had a hysterectomy and you are on estrogen therapy, you really want to be looking at balancing that estrogen and not taking just the single unopposed estrogen. So those are some ways that your thyroid can be impacted by your estrogen or your endocrine system. So again, thinking about your endocrine system as this whole puzzle, we need to look at the way the pieces play together, and your estrogen and your thyroid are really, really connected. And you're just going to start to see symptoms if either one of those is out of balance, because they're going to start to jack up the other one. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions. And I would also love for you to subscribe to my channel, where I will be sharing more information all about our hormone system. Thanks, and see you later.